Well, I was not ready for a quiz, nor did I study for any of that. So anyway, but we did at least study for this match. It's the Battle of the Blues. We got the Dallas Fuel versus Boston, and the desk was very unanimous for Dallas Fuel, which, I mean, the stats don't lie. They're undefeated right now.
Yeah, Dallas Fuel looking pretty good in this meta coming into this. I pumped up the Dallas stock slime and I was like, you know what, this is a hive mind meta. It's all about rush and rushing together and working as a singular unit, and no one does that better than the Dallas Fuel when led by Hanbin. They do have some pretty good dives with Fearless, and yes, Fearless, one of the best Winstons in the world, but when it comes to the rushes, Hanbin leading from the front, it served him well in Kickoff Clash, and it's doing just the same here in Summer Showdown. As you can see, Sparkle is going to be starting again over Doha.
Yeah, the first two matches for the Dallas Fuel, they kind of incorporated more Doha. It was Doha and Edison against New York and Glads, and it went well, you know, they're still undefeated. And I think they were able to even flex and be more creative around the meta, having Doha go on May, both on Lijiang Tower Control Center against New York and Oasis Gardens against the Gladiators, both of which Doha won using that May. But just since in that recent match against Toronto, they incorporated more Sparkle and Edison. And kind of you and I were ruminating on why would you have Sparkle over Doha, and I think that's just, you know, pure a skill gap, because I think they have very similar play styles. I kind of describe Doha as this loose cannon. He's just as aggressive, I think, as Sparkle, but I think Sparkle is just an expert at the hero.
You're a loose cannon, Doha. One more Genji play and I'm going to take your badge. Sparkle's going to be doing a lot of vanilla Genji play here, I imagine, marking Valentine. Speaking of which, let's look over at the opening roster for the Boston Uprising. And once again, I believe we are going to be in our full Korean meta. Mag has been swept off his feet from the Justice over to a Boston Uprising. Who were like, you know what, we could use ourselves a fourth tank player for the season after letting Marvel go early on. And Mag's come in to be their Junker Queen.
Yeah, well, I got to talk to at least interim general manager Mineral about Mag, and like, why are they so excited on Mag? Why were they just jumping on that contract? And Mineral said that Mag is one of the best young main tank players in Overwatch. And of course, yeah, he brings all the main tank heroes, but beyond that, this is a meta that is always evolving to different things, and they felt that Mag has been able to adapt well when the meta has shifted away from his signature heroes. So just unfortunate that the warm welcome for Mag was against the San Francisco Shock, where they got dominated and even full held on Hollywood, but maybe this could be a more even match, although the Dallas Fuel are looking kind of like back in their Kickoff Clash prime.
Admittedly, Max had two goes round against the San Francisco Shock now, and the first one he did remarkably better in, with the Washington Justice going 2-3, and it all really came down to one fight on Oasis, so Mag has certainly been able to hold his own with Kaluj, but Hanbin is a different beast altogether. I've taken to calling Hanbin the knife bender. When it comes to the Jagged Blade, this guy is mega accurate, and for my money, possibly the best Junker Queen of the world right now.
And that's going to be an important matchup. I feel like we didn't get a true sense of Boston Uprising in that last match, especially with a new tank. It makes such a big difference. But Boston are down bad right now. They're on a 2-loss streak. They haven't won since that surprise upset against the Atlanta Reign. And Boston are going to need to win at least 2 of the remaining 3 matches, including this one, to have a chance to qualify for the Summer Showdown. So the Boston have Fuel left to play, Toronto and Vancouver, and I think that's winnable.
That is winnable, but it is also a little bit of a rough schedule. Vancouver are looking very good in this meta. For Dallas Fuel, though, Lemon, I'm pretty sure if they win this, they are guaranteed to make it to Toronto, and probably in a good seed as well, because it would be 4-0. And there's no way a 4-0 doesn't get into our top 8. We're all going off to Toronto to play on LAN. Remember, tickets are available now for Summer Showdown. Check out the Toronto Defiant Twitter for that as we head into Nepal. And, well, I think everyone's playing exactly what we expect. Sparkle and Edison likely to swap here, as Edison has no competitive history on the Pharah.
Just a bit of joking around. I was actually surprised that maybe Fuel didn't want to use Doha for this map in particular, especially for High Rise. Shout out to Chatty for helping me notice the name change on that map. It's no longer Village, it's High Rise. But yeah, I think Doha would have been super solid to bring out that May, but it's not that Sparkle can't play it, so maybe Sparkle on some May.
Okay, yeah, it is for Sparkle, mate. All right, so I've taken Doha's Genji, and now I'm going to take his Mei as well. We are just completely merging Sparkle and Doha. They already had very similar hero pools. What's Uprising actually made a play here to go for the high ground, whereas Dallas Fuel, they're more about the chase here, as I believe they're going to be using the passive speed from Chio rather than the amp it up to try and force Boston Uprising to over-rotate.
That is a good first Mei wall, and Sparkle almost got booped off the map, but Mag did manage to survive that. So surprisingly, having to use the shout, though, is not ideal, so Boston going to play passive for the next 11 seconds until that is back, but MCD finds the rough end of an icicle to the dome, and without that break, the rest of the dominoes of Boston will fall, and that's the first cap for Fuel, which is great to defend with a Mei.
The cleave damage as well from Sparkle is so good for mitigating the premise of AoE healing. It does 100 DPS, that beam, now that it doesn't actually have a hard stun attached to it, which means that it can carve through most of the Inspire healing and basically amped up Lucio healing as well and leave people essentially on sort of stagnant health if they are getting completely pocketed. And that means everyone else can find those killing blows afterwards. Now Dallas Fuel can try and lock down this area defensively, which is exactly where Mei wants to be.
Oh, that ice block is out too, and Boston almost got a nice knife pull onto Hanbin, but not something they were easy to react to. Meanwhile, you just have someone in the back line here. Fuel are separated from their DPS, and I think they're all out of swords, especially without Chio, but Dallas Fuel still managed to hold on the Pillar's control while Boston moving up. Valentine is kind of on his own. Faith and Mag are coming out of spawn, and Victoria is still on the other side of the map. So Boston kind of need to regroup, and they're just going to call for it instead of wasting time.
Strange that Victoria seemed to ignore the call to reset for a little while, was trying to burn down the Mei wall. I wonder if that was a little bit of a communications issue from Boston Uprising. They're going to need to figure those out if there are any, because the Mei strains your communication wounds and will be even more so now with a blizzard available. If everyone gets trapped in this, it's going to be curtains, Lemon.
As soon as Boston go out the one door, Dallas Fuel are quick to chase them. The blizzard is dropped and Mag is frozen up, and that shotgun of Junker Queen does so much damage. It's a shotgun after all. The zombie video games have prepared you for this moment, and we're also one fight away for Fuel to have a flawless round one.
Could indeed be forced. I believe they've only lost, maybe they haven't actually lost anyone thus far. Oh no, they did lose Chio earlier, I believe. And now, Chio does have a sound barrier ready to go. Faith is still a couple of percentage points away. That's a wonderful wall.
Okay, Fuel just have to win the one fight. They don't have Chio for the sound barrier. Boston have 5 ults. You gotta pull the trigger on something. Mag couldn't find an opportunity for the rampage, but Boston can still go to point and try to sustain there. Hanbin is in the backline with a rampage, and Victoria just can't seem to find any space, but he's still gonna go for the overclock at 40 HP, trying to help his healers on the point. Victoria moves in to go for the cap for Boston, and Fuel will reset.
Boston Uprising, that was actually surprisingly cheap considering the position that Dallas Fuel had to begin with. Only 2 ultimates expended in the overclock and the rally that MCD needed to maintain presence on that point. And with Sparkle having used the Blade previously, now Faith actually has a free sound barrier to use in response to either Chio's sound barrier or to maybe bring Valentine to a huge amount of health behind this Blade.
Just Boston are letting Dallas Fuel rotate anywhere they want. Fuel have done a complete 360 around the map, and Boston are playing point, and this is the free space that Edison needs for the overclock. He's already got 1 pick, but the Blade from Valentine could do a lot of work, but he's been booped away, and he goes after Edison, cleans that off, but Boston don't have MCD. Faith will have to drop sound barrier before someone else drops if they need it. Mag goes over to the Mega, and yeah, Fuel try to flip the point as Boston were running for resources and playing things slow without MCD, but they do prevent the flip, and, well, they flip it right back either way.
Oh, Hanbin super low. Victoria might be able to get the stagger kill here, but the mega health pack is enough to sustain Hanbin in this particular case. Valentine in that Blade did a really good job of using his dash to actually steal a health pack from a vulnerable member of Dallas Fuel and top himself up at the same time. So great understanding of the order of actions you need to accomplish there as the Genji. Dallas Fuel aren't taking too much poke damage for actually making these rotations, so they have plenty of resources by the time the brawl ensues.
Finally, Boston cut off these rotations. It's like they were playing point, and then that was just going to gonna give room for Edison to get picks again. Sound barrier first from Boston. Fielder matches the rally. A lot of sustain from both sides, and MCD's the first to fall again. That's 2 consecutive fights that Fuel focus down the supports, and Mag just really has to own this front line and not just let Dallas Fuel squeeze by. But speaking of squeezing by, the DPS of Boston made an impact of their own, but not before the star of the show is in the sky, and it's Sparkle that ends the fight for Fuel. Overtime will start, and there's no one nearby for Boston to touch, but that was a pretty close Sanctum round 1.
One good health pack still deserves another, but yes, this was much closer than I anticipated when it seemed like Boston Uprising might actually lose that round with 5 ultimates available. Boston Uprising, they had their troubles with the Mei, but the second that Dallas Fuel lost that 100%, that 99% fight lemon, it was going to be so difficult to actually rotate in with the Mei because Boston Uprising would have been able to do some preliminary damage. And if I had any critiques of Boston thus far, it seems like their poke phase is a little bit weaker, but that's also credit to Dallas Fuel's pathing and their ability to avoid engagements before they really need to take them. Because when you're attacking this control point, you have to try and minimize damage on the way through so that you can just save your resources for when you're in brawling distance.
I would have liked if Boston cut off those rotations a bit better, but Fuel, I mean, winning that first fight, defending with Mei is huge, and that's going to be their goal for this one here on Nepal High Rise. As Fuel already have summoned up that first wall. It doesn't isolate anyone. Boston engaged now with the shout. MCD shield bashes back. He's learned his lesson from Sanctum, but Mag needs all the health packs. Boston taking a second to heal back up. As Fuel now get pulled forward. Sparkle doesn't have ice block either, and that's a critical mistake. There's no DPS left from the Fuel, and Fuel were hoping to defend first with Mei, and I wonder if Sparkle's gonna swap back to Genji after this. Either way, Boston have the point first.
I'm surprised that Dallas Fuel didn't actually play for low ground here and just try and fight on the point, forcing Boston Uprising to come to them and then isolating whoever may touch with the wall from Sparkle, which used to be how we saw old like Symmetra and Mei compositions play together. Potentially they were concerned that Boston Uprising might intercept them on the way. Now coming through, Hunter's already taken so much damage.
MCD was almost the target of a really good push from Dallas Fuel, but they couldn't reach him in time, and Boston kind of were set up around to almost bait MCD and cut off those rotations, and you can already see by the amount of poke that Dallas Fuel have taken that they're taking a second to have that Inspire from Fielder get them back up and build up towards the rally. Now Fuel re-engage, but they're still trapped in this small room, and Sparkle walls himself off from his own team. That was not the plan. Feeding was not on the menu, but Fuel finally do lose the fight after just taking so long to get it going. Now Boston are up at 40%.
Fielder lost for rally as well, while Sparkle Iron Giant did you go, I stay. Boston Uprising, they are going so fast right now that Dallas Fuel simply can't get the sightlines they need for Edison to be able to build up a rail shot before Boston Uprising have already taken someone's life away. And Boston Uprising, they are being well served by this speed and tempo. An attempt at a fake here to try and get to a point and just wall off whoever may come.
Oh, yeah, well, Valentine just falls over to an icicle from Sparkle. He got the sound barrier. And the Sparkle's like, no, we stay. Bad Chio. In the doghouse you go. We need to chill on the point. Because it makes, I agree with Sparkle. They're close to Blizzard. They have Mei walls. They should be playing point.
And now, with no sound barrier, Valentine's going to be able to feast with this Dragon Blade. That's the safest Dallas Fuel I've ever felt. We're walled off on point. We have a sound barrier for no reason. Here comes Valentine with the blade.
Oh, time to go back to point. This is our safe space. Wall is up. You're not allowed in our clubhouse. What's the password? And Fuel is just playing keep away. And Valentine's blade has got nothing. That's a mega rampage from Mag, though. Hits everyone from the Fuel. And Fuel engaged into them and just fell over and didn't get a single kill.
Oh, Dallas Fuel. I thought that maybe after they managed to wall off the blade, that it would have been their fight to win. However, Boston Uprising, now one fight away from being able to claim the area where the Mei is at her strongest. The Blizzard here is going to be a huge tool to take back the point, but Boston Uprising don't need to fight this because they still have so much breathing room. With Dallas Fuel 29%, Sparkle's dead.
Sparkle's like, I got touch, question mark, even though that's usually Tino's job. Sparkle's having a day of Overwatch, and Edison finds himself isolated. Good collapse from Boston. They had to go so far for that kill, though, but it's still a 5-on-3. Rampage from Hanbin, and see if they can salvage this fight. Fuel in a 3-on-5, have to face now the Sound Mirror of Fate. It's a lot of resources, and Fuel just couldn't escape in time. So Boston will get the flip and force a round. Oh, here's Sparkle with the touch, guys. I got it. Slow poke emoji. Boston will still get round 3.
Boston Uprising, they have managed to find their tempo again. This is what excited us about the Boston Uprising in their first match of the split when they were up against the Atlanta Reign. They were playing cohesively, they were playing fast, and it feels like today Victoria has once more come to play, and I felt like Victoria was a little bit absent previously when it came to the San Francisco shot game. I think they got outdone by Kilo significantly. Obviously, Proper demanded a lot of attention in that game, particularly on Circuit Royale with multiple aces. But the fact is, right now, Boston have an unbelievable DPS difference. Victoria, Sojourn the whole time, 9.7k damage. Edison, the same, Sojourn the whole time, 5.8k. That's almost twice as much, at least 80% more from Victoria than from Edison.
Still laughing that Sparkle overruled Chio like that. Are your supports like the shot callers? I don't know, but I'll listen to Sparkle any day. Either way, we're going into the final round of map 1, and Fuel already hugging the left side while Boston are on the point. So Fuel just gonna see if they get poked. Edison got knife pulled by Mag, uses the shift key to get out. Now Valentine could have had an opportunity to close in on that, but he's just playing so far away. Cap could be in the hands of Boston, but Fuel will present themselves at the archway. It has to be Hanbin that takes this poke. You can't afford to lose Fielder, although he hasn't really died as much as MCD, and you got Victoria low, so Dallas Fuel run in to finish off that kill, but Victoria got to safety, and Boston used this moment to punish Fuel on their approach while they're out of cover. Now it's even numbers on both sides and no healers from the Fuel. We're left with Sparkle versus the world, and that'll be the end of that. Boston will cap first.
Even with Sparkle doing so much damage here, 75%, I think that Sparkle might be getting lost in the source of I'm a good Genji. Where in the comments we saw Victoria go down to about 30 HP, and that should be when Sparkle's striking, hitting the dash and then getting out and getting that killing blow. But I think Sparkle was just lost in the brawling source right now, and Dallas Fuel need to rein him in and get him to finish these kills.
Yeah, Victoria just did a good job of not dying, which I can't say that for my teammates all the time, but we'll see if Boston can hold on to this point. They'll have a sound barrier. And it's about your Lucio overruling your DPS when you want to use this. But MCD is very low. I'm surprised Faith is just going to let him die like that. But the shout comes out from Mag. MCD's back at full health. That's important. Sparkle is not getting those resets because of that. As Faith drops the sound barrier during the Fuel push. And Edison is cut down. And Sparkle wants to do some more cutting with the blade. Goes after the front line and the back line and everyone in between. That's 2 fights in a row for the Boston Uprising.
Blade for blade, I think Faith might have been a touch too excited there when it came to using that sound barrier. Valentine does get a couple more percentage points here, Lemon, but now with Chio using that sound barrier to reinforce Sparkle and allow him to dive into all those members of Boston Uprising, there's once more not much to answer Valentine's blade. Yes, Fielder has a rally, but Fielder's rallies have honestly been fairly early shutdowns from Boston Uprising. They're really good at target focusing the Brigitte, because remember, it doesn't give armor anymore. It's only overhealth. So that's easily chunked through, especially if you catch her early.
You got the whip shot on the Valentine, so you couldn't get in position for the blade. Fuel with an important flip. I see a lot of blue sometimes, and I think Boston are going to be turning blue after this fight. Fuel being able to use the rally. Actually, all 3 ults from the Fuel, and it's just blood on the floor. We're left with 3-on-3, and an overclock still active from Edison, who still locks onto 2 targets. Boston are just barely holding on, and honestly, since the point is in control of the Fuel, they should just give this up.
I like how Dallas Fuel there did a split around that central pillar to try and deal with Mag, making sure that he didn't have an option where he could hit a Carnage on all 3 of them, knowing that Mag's best chance to survive is hitting those wounds, getting the drain, and that comes mostly from the Carnage or the Rampage. Mag now catching up when it comes to his own Rampage. He's only a couple of percentage points away, and Dallas Fuel, frankly, don't have an answer for this. The best answer they have is preemptive positioning on multiple verticalities and in a wider spread so Mag can't hit multiple members.
Yeah, just playing outside of the point and just letting Hanbin take it on the chin. Mag, let's see if you can find a good target for the Rampage, and even Hanbin won't stay on the point. So just the threat of a Rampage is enough for Boston to maybe get the point as Fuel re-emerge to stop the flip. They get hit by the Rampage. Fielder, Hanbin, Sparkle, all anti-healed and running for the hills to try and heal back up. And despite a 3-man Rampage, it's only a 1-kill advantage for Boston, and MCD keeps getting first blooded. He is way too far forward and accessible by Hanbin. Tells me that MCD definitely needs to adjust position, while Fuel, Chio is back as president of the Fuel, calling the sound barrier engage, and Fuel are fighting, or Boston are fighting tooth and nail because they're down 59%. It's 99 and overtime for Fuel, and it's just not over yet. There is still 4 members of the Boston Uprising versus the 3 of Fuel, and the resources are running dry for those defenders, and Boston finally get the flip.
They did a good job there saying we go again after seeing Chio use a precautionary sound barrier to try and keep Dallas Fuel's members alive. Now Fielder can at least drag everyone forward with this rally and force Boston Uprising off the point, maybe force a capture.
Okay, the rally first from Fuel, waiting for the overhealth to stack up. Kind of Fielder gatekeeping all the entries from Valentine, who dashes in, gets over the wall, doesn't get picked yet, but Fuel now at overtime on their side. It's his final round. Sparkle at the plate, goes after MCD, who shield bashes away, uses the rally, but it's not enough to supplement the Boston Uprising in the final fight. As Fuel, man, it got real close, but at the end, it's all Fuel all day as they take map number 1.
That last fight was masterfully crafted by the Dallas Fuel, knowing we've got the rally to work with. So we're just going to move on forward, knowing that Boston Uprising can't counter us. They have to disengage, and putting down the Disruptor field in the exit that Mag had to take. So then Mag had to make a choice. Do I stay in, fight this rally and die, or do I go through the Disruptor field? And I need to use my shout to do that, which is the main tool that would be used to get back onto the point. Dallas Fuel made sure that Mag had no winning options, only ways to lose or lose slowly, and it's that kind of macro understanding that is going to bring the maps in this series.
And Fuel also back on the same page after High Rise looked a little wonky of different ideas coalescing together, but Fielder did an amazing job of just marking Valentine and making sure his Genji didn't get as much value as Sparkles. So great first map from the Dallas Fuel. We're going to throw it to a break and see where we end up on map number 2. I love that Dallas Fuel hype video, but will anyone ever go pick up those players from the rooftop? They don't seem to know how to get down, but they're still on top in this series, 1-0 against Boston after Nepal went well.
There's a good chance that when they're on that rooftop, Chio may have used Sound Barrier just to make them feel safe.
It's like, guys, we could just jump. Chio, no!
I can eat the full damage using Sound Barrier. Easy.
True.
Boston Uprising. That was a lot closer than I anticipated, actually. Coming into this after Boston Uprising's lackluster performance, let's say, against the San Francisco Shock, I figured that against one of our avatars of war in this particular meta, the Dallas Fuel, that this might be a lot less parity than we're currently seeing. Admittedly, Dallas Fuel seem to be having a couple of communications issues when it comes to finishing off these kills, and I imagine that in the break, Russia's been like telling this team, hey, when you guys get someone low, we've got to send in our homing missile Sparkle on them. We can't allow players to be getting away with like sub 30 HP when they are dashable. Dallas Fuel need to clean that up if they're going to want to try and maintain these a map record against the Boston Uprising, who, when it comes to like raw DPS power right now, they are pulling even or pulling ahead.
Yeah, Fuel are still doing really well just in the season in general. It feels like they're the experts at Rush. When there was the kickoff clash, kind of that Zarya-ish meta with the Reaper, they did well there. Now we're kind of another type of Rush, and Dallas Fuel are doing well here. Fuel have only dropped 4 maps this qualifier only, and they did lose Midtown to Toronto, so this could be a weaker point for Fuel.
Indeed, it could be. There might be some differing schools of thought within the team as to how to try and use the high ground, especially on second, where that bridge can really be a determining factor in multiple fights. The first and the second fight on Midtown can be determined by positioning on that bridge. Dallas Fuel are going to be starting off here in the pizzeria, of course. Edison might decide to play the Ashe. Is not unknown for him, and admittedly, Edison played quite well on the Ashe recently. And I think, surprisingly almost, I think were they up against Toronto, where Edison out-ashed Hisu, and that was quite strange.
That was strange. Yeah, Edison mostly plays Sojourn and only plays Ashe on Midtown and Gibraltar, and this is a quick fight where Boston, as soon as they're low, the reaction time on Sparkle is insane to get those resets. So already 2 kills for him. The Blade generation is gonna be cracked. He's killed 4. Is Sparkle getting the ace? Come on, Edison. Come on, why'd you do that?
Come on, Brett. All right, new rule for Overwatch League. Don't try and, like, early camp Dallas Fuel, because I have news for you. You aren't going to play faster than the Dallas Fuel. This is the fastest team in the league. Their coach is named Rush for a reason. They thrive on speed, and if they catch you unprepared, then you are going to get absolutely farmed. You are better to have a set battle against Dallas Fuel where you can see them coming.
Why was Victoria there anyway? Like, I was busy looking at the stats, and I'm like, oh, Boston already died. I was expecting his Sojourn to be way further back than he was, but now Fuel get free bridge control, and we'll see how Boston want to take this back.
Well, at the moment, it's only really Chio and Spargo are hanging out here, but that's a very aggressive dive in from Valentine. Does force Spargo to move back a bit. That could be punished later. Or Boston Uprising going to have to cede away all this territory again.
Boston just did their little battle cry, and it just scared Fuel off the bridge immediately without even having a fight happen. And then Fuel, once they had their shout, re-engaged and scared Boston away. Then we'll have that Lucio of Faith back, so Boston actually have a chance to go on top of this bridge, because mainly you want bridge control because of your Sojourn player. You're just going to have a good high ground, good range, and then those window panes are great covers. So see how Fuel want to hold it. Hanbin is at the door. He got a knife pull onto Faith, but he learned his lesson from last time.
Dallas Fuel got a really good setup for this fight. All they need to do is get some pressure on the car, and the blade comes out. What a fight.
Why do you guys always start fighting when I'm done talking? It's just, you stare at each other so lovingly for so long. But Fuel, they drop off the high ground, beat down the DPS of Boston, and we're back with Fuel. Is there even gonna be a recontest from Boston? They're gonna have to touch soon. It's 1 meter away, and yeah, no, Boston dead in the water. So Fuel will have 5.5 for C.
Boston are postured for an early fight here, though. Victoria is already going to fall. At this point, they might as well be staggers on a late spawn.
MCD's just toast. Where'd he go? We found him. And Fuel is just hunting for their prey. Edison gets to take a well-earned break on the cart after stealing Sparkle's ace. We all forgive him though. But Fuel, I mean, kind of haven't been stopped so far.
We should talk about how the dynamic of Dallas Fuel has changed now that they're playing Ashe instead of Sojourn. I think the Ashe is much better at doing poke damage towards the Genjis and forcing them to play in more reserved positions, whereas for Sojourn's a lot better at shutting down the Junker Queen. It seems like Hanbin's confident enough in going up against Mag on the Junker Queen, but he doesn't think he needs the Disruptor shot as much, and instead it's better to shut down Valentine. You can see how much damage he's already taking and having to back off.
Fielder and MCD popping the rally. We have the Edison Bob if you wanted to throw it behind the Boston Uprising to trap them in the fight. Sound barrier first from Chio. Second sound barrier from Fate. Rampage from Hanbin cuts through the Boston Uprising as they're still committed in this fight. And all of Boston were focusing down the Edison Bob that was right behind them, and they had to. They had no route of escape, and Hanbin pulls Mag right out as soon as he tried to escape. MCD is burning alive, and Valentine at least is there. He's gonna blade while burning? Yeah, he burned alive all right. I'm not sure I love that from Boston, but at least while everyone is looking at Valentine, Mag was able to slice through 3 people in the tiny room. And I can't believe Fuel didn't win that fight.
Well, Sparkle just gets his blade out, carves an L into the wall, and then falls. And this now means that Dallas Fuel have one major threat less to worry about. Victoria's Overclock is going to be the big tempo decider here for Boston Uprising on their defensive posture. So the question is Victoria going to play for a high ground here, or play a little bit closer towards Mag to try and carve through Hanbin a little bit easier? Remember, during Overclock, those rails get piercing qualities, which means they can hit multiple people if they're in the line of fire, and that really taxes the AoE healers.
Oh, Hanbin is scary with these knives, and just anyone getting pulled. I think even just pulling the Junker Queen is good, especially with how low Mag is, and Boston shout in, and Sparkle gets dominated, just like Valentine. At least Sparkle can laugh it off as Boston laugh away this fight, and it's about damn time Boston start winning fights, because that time bank for Fuel was ridiculous for C.
Yeah, so it's starting to get whittled down, and once again, Boston Uprising going for a spawn camp. I don't think this is a great idea against Dallas. I've already talked about how fast they move and how you need to have a good amount of preparation before a fight with Dallas. However, it seems like Dallas are actually moving a little bit more slowly out of this and trying to catch Boston Uprising making a mistake.
Fuel, I mean, could just get their rotations cut off, especially with Chio escorting Hanbin around, who takes a whip shot to the dome. I'm not sure what Fuel were planning. Because half of their team was still in spawn, and Fielder rejoined Chio and Hanbin, but the DPS of Fuel were slightly disconnected on that. But again, Boston doing a great job of cutting off rotations.
Uncharacteristic bit of trepidation. Edison, you can't take those peaks, although given where he died here, I've got to assume that was an absolutely mad shot from Victoria that must have just been pixels wide. That doesn't like it was too audacious a peak from Edison, but in the end, who knows? Victoria managed to get that rail charge somehow.
Okay, good disruptor shot from Boston to just stop Fuel from engaging into them, at least on that path. Victoria has to jump away. Fuel have lost their chance to punish him, or I guess Edison will still do it at range. He solo kills both DPS because he was just against the wall as Boston were walking by, so Fuel will go back to the cart.
All right, Bob here, in hand for Edison. The thing about Bobs in this meta, they are super good, but you can't use them as an engagement tool. Maybe in this particular case, you could send out an early Bob to get free push on the cart and try and force Boston Uprising to engage into your objective play, but they are much better when Boston Uprising have already used resources to deal with other threats, like an aggressive Sparkle or a Hanbin shouting in.
Edison has the Bob, sees MCD, hoping for the knockup, but even just gatekeeping the chokes is what Fuel's goal is. But all of Boston commit to dismantling the Bob, and they're still okay as Mag re-engages with the Rampage, forces the Fuel to use the sound barrier as Hanbin is looking for picks with a knife, but he's not getting any follow-up from Edison and Sparkle. That's because they're playing just so far, or actually they're behind him. Sparkle now finds an opportunity for the blade. Once Boston do engage, they're all anti-heal too, a perfect time for Sparkle. He needs a pack to keep going. Fielder's got his back. Now 1 minute left for Fuel, and they've lost Edison, but they only have a few more meters to go, and Mag is the final boss you have to deal with. Valentine will be back soon with the blade. Boston have a win condition, but surviving is the hardest goal right now. MCD will keep faith alive on the touch with the rally in time. Valentine is back with the blade, and Art has already dealt with Fielder. This might have just stopped the push for Fuel.
Yeah, Hanbin's gonna fall, and that was such an uncharacteristically, cautious and slow fight there from Dallas Fuel. Neither Hanbin nor Sparkle were willing to pull their ultimate in good time to force Faith to use for Sound Barrier. There was a good chance for Hanbin. He's gone Zaya. Okay, this is new. This is going to give a lot of chance for Sparkle to maybe play a pseudo frontline with a double bubble.
Oh!
Edison's already dead.
The disruptor shot into the assassination. Did they catch Edison scoping? Well, they caught him lacking at Sparkle. He's going for the backhand. Does he get it? 0.7 meters. I almost lost it all on that one. Sparkle gets bubbled, and he's able to dash back to safety as Fuel just have to have Hanbin go to the cart, but Sparkle's the one with the touch. He's done for. Fuel will have the rally to work with, and Hanbin's at 100 charge. He says, no DPS, no problem. I am the DPS now, but he might have to think about touching. I don't even know who's keeping this overtime going. Nobody is. As Hanbin was spawn camping, he forgot about the most important thing. But either way, Fuel had 5.5 minutes and did not complete. I call that a flub.
That was a massive flub. The penultimate fight in particular, Dallas Fuel had the Boston Uprising in a vulnerable position. They had a Rampage and they had a Blade. And they decided that Sparkle should be waiting for the sound barrier to go off before he blades. Sparkle there, I think they need to go in with a dynamite from Edison, hit Faith, and then have Sparkle blade Faith. And then you try to hit the Ajax beat, but it doesn't matter. In the end, if Faith hits for beat, that's fine. Sparkle can disengage after that, and then you have Hanbin move through with the Rampage on a Boston Uprising who can't defend themselves. But Dallas Fuel, they spent so long poking and prodding that Boston Uprising could negotiate themselves these positions. They could narrow down the angles that Edison was playing on, and it seemed like they were bringing out each of their ultimates with, like, such staggered frequency that every time they came out, there was plenty to deal with it. Like the Bob came out and there was no additional pressure from Dallas Fuel, so he was easily burned down by Victoria and the headshots and the rail shots. Then we eventually got the Rampage from Hanbin. That was booped too by Faith, and then Sparkle brings out the Blade, and there's so much pressure on that because Boston Uprising are still in safe positions and can just focus down their Genji. He has to hide away for half of it.
I feel like Valentine and Sparkle are getting a lot more attention given to them. I mean, 2 blades for 0 kills that we saw from both of them, but just an intelligent call from Boston for the disruptor shot and kill onto Edison. That alone, I think, is what bought that defensive win for Boston. So no mistakes this time. Fuel not going to play too far forward. You never know when you can get knife pulled or just anything random can happen. I mean, Victoria got the rough end of that last time. So Fuel just kind of floating around the middle of the map, maybe trying to see if they can cut off Boston's rotations to this left building. Now Fuel find themselves behind the attacking team as Boston want to make their way towards the point, but Valentine is fighting an isolated Edison, and that's a fantastic duel for him to win. 5-on-4 for the Boston Uprising, who already got a first take and could easily get the second now that they got a second kill. There's no damage for Fuel and no healing. Fuel played that so passive.
And that was actually just amazing macro understanding of how to be the architect of that fight from Boston Uprising. They even have Valentine dash into Fire Station. It's almost like a bait. You want Dallas Fuel to move in there because that's where Edison can't really affect the fight because everyone's in hard cover. And when Dallas Fuel start to move to try and cut off Boston Uprising, they can have their faster members who haven't used the shout yet cut in between like a wedge, isolate Edison, and then go up against the Dallas Fuel that are lacking in damage. And Sparkle here, already taking a touch of damage. Chio the same, going to force that Lucio to move on back as Boston Uprising have plenty of time to start moving this car.
It's up to Victoria and Edison to get some good poke in and set up their Genjis for success, but you want that poke to happen first before you get too close. Valentine just jumping in front of the barrel of Fuel. Now the defense gets to search forward, see what else that they can get, but peeking around the corner is kind of sus when you can just get knife pulled randomly, but Mag's dead, so Fuel are back on bridge.
Yeah, a quick reset of positioning here. Victoria looks to see if a well-placed shot could get rid of Chio. Obviously, Lucio is a hugely valuable target. Right now, Dallas Fuel, they are holding this here, and Hanbin might get a huge carnage in this zone.
It's when does Fuel want to give this up, but kind of overstayed their welcome. They managed to get out without losing anyone as Chio drops Sound Barrier, doesn't hit Edison, but the other 4 members of Fuel are going to see what they can make out of this fight. And already taking care of the DPS of Boston is massive. Before the barrier could come out, before the rally from MCD could happen at all. So Boston really got to take some initiative in these fights.
I think one of the hallmarks of some of the better teams we're seeing in this meta is that their Lucios, Chio, and Violet on San Francisco Shock in particular, they are pretty free when it comes to the usage of a sound barrier. They decide that our team is good enough, but we don't need to use this to answer something like a sound barrier or a rampage. We can deal with them as they come, and just use the sound barrier aggressively to take a fight that they believe needs to be won, or that they can turn around with that extra health.
Oh, Boston don't want to take care of Hanbin or Sparkle or Fielder on their high ground, but Fuel just never dropped. They have the upper hand, and now they drop a little too late while Boston are almost through the underground side. Blade v Blade. We're watching Sparkle first. He's playing this patiently, waiting out the sound barrier before dashing back to his team. And it's okay to do nothing because you're just going to die if you blade into the barrier anyway. You have the Hanbin Rampage and really just a zoning tool, but Boston stayed a little too long and Fuel had the speed jump on them, so that's a clean fight for Fuel.
That's the kind of decisiveness that I really missed from Dallas Fuel on third point of Midtown. Having Sparkle just go in with the blade, hit a slice on Faith, force out the sound barrier, then leave and start deflecting when Valentine does for counterblade. That allows for Hanbin to get a 3-man rampage that cannot be answered by the Boston Uprising as the cart starts to get away from them. Dallas Fuel now, they can blockade the entrance towards this cart, and it forces Dallas Fuel to, or rather it forces Boston some weird pathing.
Valentine's trying his best, and that's all I gotta say. He's got 11 deaths, most on the team, almost doubling his teammates, and he's just looking for any opportunity to put pressure on Edison, but Edison sometimes, most of the time, wins those duels. Meanwhile, you got a rampage from Mag. He doesn't have MCD, so how can you really play this without the healing that you have? And Fuel just don't have tanks, so it doesn't matter. Boston, I mean, it was just fight after fight for the Fuel, so it's good to see some signs of life from Boston as they just finish up this fight 2v1. Valentine and Mag chasing down Chio, who was able to escape, but I don't think Boston could keep up this push with the people they have left.
Yeah, presence on the cart hasn't been enough. This is going to force a disengage here. Valentine gets caught again, up to 12 deaths now, Lemon. A huge amount for the Genji. There's so much pressure being applied to Valentine right now. Dallas Fuel seem to have changed up their tactics since Nepal and started respecting Valentine a lot more. And it's actually heavily limited how much damage Valentine can do. Sparkle currently 3k ahead as he's sitting on 11.4k compared to Valentine's 8.3. There is so much damage towards Boston's Genji.
MCD has actually more healing than Fielder, so it's not like he's not giving Valentine the attention he needs. Sometimes it's just the RNG of Edison having the better shot when it comes to those close range quarters. So Boston have the overclock, and you're not going to pop it yet. MCD is shield bashing above the window in front of Fuel like that. Not sure what he's cooking up in that brain, but Boston now without MCD ain't gonna be living much longer. Here's the body flailing over the red post, and Fuel will take a fight for free.
Now what was a hearty 5-minute time bank for the Boston Uprising on point B has not been rewarded with progress. Only 50 seconds remain. Boston Uprising, they invested the overclock, admittedly only the overclock in the previous fight, but Dallas Fuel weren't forced to use anything. MCD's early death meant that Dallas Fuel were cruising down easy streak, knowing that there was no burst healing available in the form of those repair packs. Sparkle now can force out the sound barrier once more to set up Hanbin for a rampage to victory using his Dragon Blade.
MCD got knife pulled. Boston used the shout to just back him up, but Fuel used their shout second, and that's what's important. It's the blade from Valentine. Face barrier is still not getting popped despite his team getting popped, and Fuel invests 2 support ultimates and the overclock to win this. And Fuel, you have Boston has 8 seconds left. What are we waiting for to use ults?
We're waiting for Overwatch 3, Lemon. All the world's longest beat is not long enough to reach the cart. The pathing simply wasn't there, the boops were too strong, and Dallas Fuel waylay Boston Uprising's attack even after their own attack ran out of steam on the final point of Midtown here. And I want to highlight how Edison actually swapped back to the Sojourn after playing that first fight of the defense of B Lemon on the Ashe. And I think it's because Valentine had done enough in terms of dying that Dallas Fuel had managed to mentally condition him into being a far more passive Genji who wasn't making as much in the way of aggressive plays and only occasionally went in on Sparkle, who always had the ability to disengage. And because of that, Dallas Fuel could then have the best of both worlds. They had to contain Valentine and they could use the Disruptor field to mess with Mag, so Hanbin got the advantage in the tank on tank.
Well, can you contain the sparkle? I don't think you can. I don't think the rest of the league can. Dallas Fuel are undefeated and on their way to lock themselves in for the Summer Showdown. We're going to send you all to a break, and we're going to find out after this if it's going to be your sweep or not. Do you want to maybe meet the Dallas Fuel and other teams who may or may not qualify? Well, it's time to get your tickets for the Summer Showdown. It's going down in Toronto, the first event in Canada, my homeland. It's going to be awesome. It might be chilly. Bring a jacket. September, after all, September 8th to 11th is a very chilly time of the year for Canada. It's going to be over at the Mattamy Athletic Center and presented by Bell. And not only is there just esports, you can actually play the esport. There's going to be Overwatch 2 free play and a fan activation zone, get some merch and cool stuff like that, and we're excited to meet you guys.
Yeah, who knows who's going to be present at the Toronto Defiance Summer Showdown. Right now, I think the only people who are guaranteed to attend are the San Francisco Shock and you guys who are buying tickets. So it could be anyone. It might not be Boston Uprising, but hey, they're doing okay so far. And honestly, Boston Uprising, they still have the capacity to turn this around, I think, so long as they don't have some weird pathings and have MCD just shield bash into 5 people and die.
Don't choke? Oh, sorry, I didn't write that one down. I'll pass it along.
Yeah, that one's not in the doc. We're going to head over to Escort next. I believe the map will be Junkertown. And we don't have ourselves any substitutions in our lineups. It's likely going to be another pair of Junker Queens rushing into each other in her home estate. We're in her territory now, so why not allow for them to do what they do best? Dallas Fuel. I think that we've seen some excellent aggression from them, and we have also seen some unbelievable brain farts as well, where Dallas Fuel just seem to like have the YouTube gaming buffering symbol in their eyes in perpetuity, and like, what are we doing in this fight again, guys? But our producer actually pointed out something nifty about Dallas Fuel's swap to Zarya in in the end of Midtown C, which is that Hanbin might have gone Zarya in that case as kind of part of the gambit for a Sparkle backcap, in that like, oh, I'm Zarya, look at me, but it's also Boston Uprising having to go, how do we deal with a Zarya? We haven't scrimmed this, no one's playing Zarya in this meta, and it might have caused a little bit more communication, sort of like overloading from Boston Uprising as they try and figure out how to play against Zarya, and it makes it more likely to miss the shenanigans of Sparkle. So our producer's a pretty good analyst too.
Yeah, I was thinking it was more the break emergency glass. We're sucking right now. Let me just YOLO this pig, because Hanbin used to be good at that, or, you know, was back at the kickoff clash. But either way, we have a spawn camp for Boston. Oh my god, the Hawk, the hog pull. I almost thought of Hawk for a second, but he almost got the pull onto Boston, who were just looming on that high ground. But Dallas Fuel still managed to sneak by on that left side. Fielder out in the open. Sparkle has to deflect to defend him. Boston are starting to trap the Fuel, but MCD and Faith just get access by the Fuel, and without those healers, Boston ain't gonna keep this up.
Dallas Fuel doing a lovely 4-1 split there. Actually, it was all about Dallas Fuel moving so fast that it forced a reaction out of Boston Uprising. They used all of their speed to try and catch up with the Dallas Fuel, so they weren't caught in like a disengagement loop. And that gave Edison a lot of room to work with, because there was no real way to get back onto Edison, who came out the opposing door after that. So a great way to break a spawn hold once again. Dallas Fuel, they are very good at getting through these first point spawn holds. And we can see Sparkle already in the back getting repair packs. He's going to be a nuisance for Boston to deal with.
And what's important is that Valentine is paying no attention to Sparkle. There's different styles of Genji, whether you want to babysit the other Genji, go for a flank onto the supports, or deal with the tank. And Sparkle has already accessed the DPS and has killed 2 before Valentine did anything at all. 0 kills, in fact. So this has been a Sparkle div with a 4K in this fight. Remember the almost ace on Midtown? Like, Sparkle is a difference maker for Dallas Fuel.
All right, guys, pack it up. Sparkle's gaming. This is done. Actually, Valentine has technically done more damage than Sparkle thus far, but I think it's a little bit of a misleading stat. Valentine actually dashed onto the cart. He's going to be so vulnerable.
Oh, Boston barely have the space. They have to touch the cart. Someone is there, but now this fight is just worthless for Boston as the cart pushes into point A. Now Boston hope to escape, and they're not. Sparkle now has a blade, and Valentine is dead again.
Admittedly, there is some good done here in that the rally was forced out of Fielder, but I think the rally being used from Fielder is nowhere near as valuable as the advanced positioning. The Dallas Fuel are now going to get on the high ground to try and force Boston Uprising to use things like the Shout and the Speed Boost and a couple of armor packs just to start negotiating their way into this first fight on Junkertown, which will give Dallas Fuel a much better chance of winning it. MCD really needs to make this rally diff count right here and keep Boston Uprising together on the cart.
Yeah, barrier v rally. Depends how patient Valentine wants to be. If he wants to wait out the barrier or blade immediately, and it's the Sparkle blade first, the Chio barrier to supplement. Fate counters, or Boston used both their support ultimates, and Valentine wastes no time to bring out his blade and cut Dallas Fuel down at their weakest point. And this was a major win for Boston too, to be able to defend while the payload is in this deep and to regain high ground control, but how much time can you take away?
Incredibly questionable rampage there from Hanbin as well, after having lost so many. Evidently his eyes, his vision just went red after seeing Boston Uprising use both of their support ultimates. But the sad thing is, if Hanbin had that in this match, or rather in this fight, it would be almost dooming for the Boston Uprising. Now it's going to be Mag who's going to be able to control the engagement here, using the Rampage off the back of an overclock from Victoria. Edison's might have trouble getting value out of the Bob. They need to force Boston's hand first and use the Bob after Boston have made their move and use their speed boosts.
As soon as Boston drop, you can throw the Bob behind them, or even just throw it to the payload if you really want to draw Boston down. But they already have some members that could anchor if they need it. Hanbin's having issues getting through this choke, and Sparkle burns alive. So now Boston could really just be more aggressive here. It's 5-on-4, but I think they're just so scared of going into this tiny room, not knowing what ults that Dallas Fuel have at this point, because Fielder is 30% ahead of the rally. So for now, Fuel are just going to wait for their 5th member of Sparkle to get back, and Boston have already pinged where Sparkle is. So Mag could be looking for a Rampage if Fuel commit up the stairs, and neither team wants to make that first move. Because really, ulting second is what's better. Mag has been pushed off and had a good Rampage moment as 3 members of Fuel were at the staircase. But now Sparkle is back, so Fuel can engage on their terms. MCD knows what's coming. He's going to leave. And the boop to get Edison's Bob off the high ground is massive.
Yeah, Mag is worried that this is a bait, but right now, Bob isn't really a huge issue for Boston. Dallas Fuel definitely used that far too early. The rally will follow up. The Rampage strikes true.
Oh, both healers of Fuel hit too, and Hanbin's shout came in way too late to save him, and Valentine pounced on that. And that's the type of synergy we like to see from the Boston Uprising. And just because of maybe Boston not acting at all went in their favor, because they took so much time from Fuel's bank, they have less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, Dallas Fuel right there, they were playing like Boston Uprising were going to make an unforced mistake. And I think that Boston are pretty good in this manner. They're not making stupid mistakes like all diving into that narrow area where they could potentially be all carved through by Hanbin. And Dallas Fuel just continues to push for the same area, which Boston Uprising were easily reinforcing the entire time. Now it's a swap-up in terms of the geography of the fight from Dallas Fuel. Boston Uprising is striking a lot more quickly because they know that Dallas Fuel have things to force this, like Rampage.
Yeah, Fuel used some important cooldowns, including the coach gun to put Valentine away from the high ground, and Fuel wanted to re-engage into that as Boston were approaching. Chio Soundbearer called, but Hanbin not hit. And this is just a dead fight for Fuel until that tank gets back.
Yeah, without the Junker Queen, you're lacking a lot of speed, you're lacking the overhealth from the shout. Sparkle, yes, has the blade, and once more it's Faith having to choose between whether they counter the blade or the Rampage. But it's an easy choice in this particular fight because Boston Uprising have high ground advantage. The Rampage simply is not as deadly, so you answer the blade every time because Sparkle can move between targets far more easily and extract value from that ultimate.
Interesting split maneuver from Boston. I think they are making their way back to the high ground, especially to be in range of the healers. Sparkle has been found on Mega, and that's an easy execute for Valentine, committing the blade only for him, as Victoria's had the space on the high ground to get a headshot onto Edison. So Fuel just not able to punish kind of that split from Boston before they regrouped back up. Now there's 6 seconds remaining for the Fuel, and the Rampage at the ready. Fielder has been disrupted from his approach, and Fuel now have to touch the cart. Chio is there. Hanbin used the Rampage, but it didn't have much effect. Boston don't have MCD, but the barrier is enough to scare Fuel away from not touching the cart.
Unbelievable boops there. Sparkle finally returns after being slew in the solo blade of Valentine and thought that maybe that would be the clutch factor. Unfortunately, Hanbin only managed to grab one person with that Rampage, and that was MCD, who is a little bit more hardy anyway, has a little bit of armor to play with when it comes to surviving that anti-heal. MCD also has the shield to try and soak up some of the damage that comes his way as well. Dallas Fuel, it feels like they spent upwards of 2 minutes just pushing that same doorway again and again, like, oh, Boston Uprising, they're going to mess up any day now, guys. Any day now, Boston Uprising, they're going to mess up, and then it's Dallas Fuel all day, baby. But we've seen this story play out before, Lemon. Dallas Fuel's attacks, sometimes they do indeed run out of fuel. But Boston Uprising, they tend to not do much better when it comes to playing offensively with this composition. And honestly, it's because this composition works so much better in a defensive posturing than it does on the attack. You can save your cooldown so much more effectively by utilizing physical cover and high ground, and the attacking team has to use things like the shout, like the amp it up on the speed boost from the Lucio to just get to you in the first place.
I think Fuel could have been way better at punishing Boston's overextension when they presented themselves on the front staircase. Boston had the high ground and even were split 3 and 2 at some points. And Fuel, yeah, just are starting to play a lot more passive than we're used to seeing them. So a lot of time just gone when they had like 5 minutes for B. So not able to cut off rotations this time. Boston, speed over to the left, maybe even having to use the shout. No, the shout's available now. They use this Fate speed to get to this left side. Sparkle dashes out, and Fuel take the high ground. Faith could try to round this corner and boop them down if he needs, but he actually gets whip shot back. So Boston are getting kind of some free push right now as Dallas Fuel reestablish themselves around the second bend. Valentine has already dashed in. He gets the shout to go back to safety, but he couldn't climb up in time, and that's a good punish for Dallas Fuel. They're improving every second we watch them. Fuel on a 5-on-4, chasing the rest of the kills, and finishing MCD here would be massive, but couldn't get... He had the shift jump available too, so that was a curious choice. And Boston salvaged the fight.
Okay, MCD somehow gets away with this aggression. Let's hope it doesn't teach him that sometimes these wild bashes are the right thing to do. In this case, MCD does extract a huge amount of value. So good job, MCD, and he's been rewarded with rally charge here as well. Dallas Fuel are going to be ready for yet another fight here, but have to be careful when they make their engagement to not use their shout too early. Otherwise, Hanbin's going to be in a very vulnerable position.
Good disruptor shot. Hanbin isolated, uses the shout to get his team regrouped back up. There's a sound barrier engage called by Chio while Boston are close, and they are close to ult, but they don't have them quite yet, and that is a critical difference. Fuel were able to sound barrier, and Faith is just getting it now, but Boston still able to get the kills despite Mag missing. The rallies used from MCD, they think it's winnable. MCD bashes into Fielder, I believe, and both Brigidas are removed. We're left with a 3-on-4 as Mag just returns to the fight now, making it 4-on-4. Sparkle has received the shout and even had the disruptor shot to get him back to safety, but there's just not enough damage to go into Mag as he just bulldozes the front line with a 3K.
Mag re-emerges with a fresh body from spawn, and the bleed damage is enough to simply exsanguinate Sparkle, contemplating removing the blade from its sheath, but in this case, it will have to stay for but a moment. Now a pair of them are going to be available, and Chio actually used his beat aggressively in that previous fight to try and give Dallas Fuel the extra vigor, the extra life force to roll onto that cart and overwhelm the Boston Uprising. The real hero, though, is Victoria. The massive damage coming from the Sojourn from the overclock is what taxed Dallas Fuel to a point where Mag could simply sweep through and get all of the killing blows afterwards. Now it's one-fight territory, and Dallas Fuel need to act.
It's already Boston just being aggressive with their position. Sparkle is isolated. He's within pack range though, so he's not in too much danger. Edison is already forced to use the shift jump, and Valentine wants to act on this. He brings out the blade, goes after Fielder. Nope, he goes after Edison, who shift jumps out, and Boston are hit with a massive rampage from Hanbin, 4 anti-healed, and Boston are left with not able to sustain through the fight the way that Dallas Fuel could with the Inspire up from Fielder. But Boston loses this fight now, but have plenty of time to push those last few meters.
Valentine there. Tried to play in the slipstream of Sparkle's blade, but unfortunately in this case, it's just a blade diff from Sparkle. Excellent awareness of all the target locations. Still, this is a dangerous area for Dallas Fuel. 3 minutes on the clock. Count them down as Boston Uprising. All they need to do is win one fight. They need to force a fight on the cart, bring Dallas Fuel down to the low ground, and then hit a fat rampage, which can't be answered by Dallas Fuel by anything other than the shout from Hanbin.
And it's such a closer Genji game too. 20-6 for Sparkle, 19-6 for Valentine. The gap is closing between our 2-star Genji players. And the final fight for Boston to take a map and keep themselves alive in this series. It's not starting their way. How does MCD and Fate die first like that? Fuel were able to have the high ground, jump into the back, and there was nothing Boston could do about it.
For Boston Uprising, here on Junkertown second, the options are going to be supremely limited, Lemon. You are so constrained by the topography of this map. It's so difficult to get rid of Dallas Fuel on the high ground. You've got to go up a staircase so it's facing away from you and where you spawn, so you've got to make such a long pathing to even get there. And that entire time, you're being pelted by Edison and by Sparker, who aren't missing their vanilla gameplay. Still, Mag at least holds onto the rampage, and now without the shout from Hanbin, people are going to be very vulnerable to this until those support ultimates come up.
Oh, Hanbin is just looming above them. Boston being so wary of how they're taking this final fight. Oh, that knife barely missing Sparkle. And they know that he has Blade. Valentine a little bit behind on that generation. Knife misses Chio. It's about who wants to pull the trigger first, and both teams, kind of their style of this Junker Queen has been to act second. But when neither team acts first, we're left in a stalemate just like this. Boston finally opt to stop playing main and go down the choke because they have Rally and Rampage. Rampage comes out, Chio hit with it, able to drop the Sound Bear before the follow-up from Boston is deadly enough to finish him off. It's a 4 versus 4. MCD staying safe. He's in the middle of a disruptor shot from Edison, and here's a punish from Sparkle. He goes after Fate, slices down MCD, and there's no healers for Boston. Do they still think this is winnable? There's only 3 defenders against the 2 of Boston, but Boston couldn't turn it around in time, so 1 minute remains.
That might be the 1 minute that counts the most, Lemon, because in this case, Dallas Fuel had to use both their support ultimates to deal with the aggression of Boston Uprising. A counter rally and then a sound barrier to deal with a Chio who was under heavy threat and antied by Mag's Rampage. However, Hanbin's Rampage is going up against a pair of DPS ultimates, Valentine and Victoria. Nothing in earnest to answer them. If Valentine can avoid this Rampage, he can carve through both Fielder and Chio if they don't have their boops available. So Hanbin's choice of peeling Shout here is going to be incredibly important to the Dallas Fuel, and the cart has actually started to roll back a little bit, so there's a new area of engagement where Boston Uprising are surrounded on all sides by high grounds.
Just Boston are in a weird position on Mega, just waiting to get Disruptor Shot. They're taking free poke from Dallas Fuel too. Would have been better to push from the right side and just go directly to Card, and Dallas Fuel right above them, kind of just poking away. But now Fuel have exposed themselves, and that's a canceled Rampage. Victoria with the overclock. Also diffing Edison just statistically, and we'll get into that later. Valentine not fast enough to chase down Chio. Meters away for Boston to take the first map in the series. Edison has the touch. Chio is too far. No, Sparkle blinks in at the last second, but there's not enough reinforcements. The Boston Uprising have taken a map from the Dallas Fuel.
Dallas Fuel are punished for going for their more aggressive positioning. It turns to be a much better area for Boston Uprising to excel in, and in particular, it was Victoria who managed to excel. That killing blow on Hanbin, stopping the Rampage in its tracks and making sure no one is bled to death in the backline like a stuck pig. That is the real difference maker, and Hanbin must be wishing that he could have that ultimate back, but in the end, Sparkle gets picked first as well. The overly aggressive Genji slain by Boston Uprising to negotiate themselves a man advantage that they've been looking for over 3 minutes.
Yeah, Victoria was like 16 and 8. My stats went away as soon as I wanted to talk about it, but a 3K damage gap between Edison and Victoria in favor of the Boston Uprising, and just final blows. Just Boston knew how to hold the high ground, and that reactive style favored them. Maybe playing passive isn't that bad after all. Boston will take Junkertown, but where will we end up after the series? We'll see you after the break. The series isn't over yet. Where's Fuel? You got one more map to play. Get your butts in those seats. At least Boston can come away smiling after Junkertown. I would say it was pretty decisive at the end.
Yeah, but Dallas Fuel decided to move to a brand new position. It's a tactic we often see just to try and mess with the comms of the opposing team, who are consistently trying to plan out for the fight that they've lost so many times, and how they can do something different moving into the last battle of the map. But because Dallas Fuel are fighting in a different position, Boston Uprising's plans kind of go out the window. Unfortunately, it was Hanbin's plans for a rampage that were slain first. Victoria hitting the critical headshot to cancel that rampage after Sparkle got preemptively picked as well meant that Dallas Fuel was simply fighting with whatever scraps remained, and their main tool was missing as well. Boston Uprising have done a really good job in quite a few of these games of actually playing the ultimate economy macroeconomics quite well, and making sure that Dallas Fuel were often having to either clutch up using mechanical skill or just take an L on a fight because they didn't have the resources to win it.
Well, someone who deserves way more resources than love is Victoria. I feel like every time he tests my vocal cords, it's on super long-range maps like your Circuit Royales or even like Junkertown. I finally got some actual stats. Thank you, Noah. 26 and 6 for Victoria eliminations versus the 11 and 10 deaths for Edison. So the Sojourn duel was very decisive in Boston's favor, and I think that was just being very established on the high ground, but also having some split defenses where they'd have Boston, their DPS, you know, Victoria on the high ground, and have Mag, MCD, and Faith kind of in closer range to Fuel. So I think that just gave Victoria a lot more peace of mind. But we'll see how peaceful things will end up now that we go to Canada. Not Toronto, not Summer Showdown yet, but New Queen Street.
And once again, I'm wondering if Dallas Fuel are going to move into a more Ash-based composition or stick to the Sojourn. Obviously, Victoria thus far, mostly Sojourn, and honestly, mostly does. I don't think that Victoria's really had much in the way of stinker performances. Even on Midtown, Victoria was doing pretty well, especially on the third-point defense, where Dallas Fuel stalled out for approximately 5 minutes. Both teams are going to opt into the Sojourn here, so once again, the Disruptor Fuels are something to look out for, and in particular, how they interact with the Junker Queens and force them to use earlier shouts, and how that could be punished by the enemy team with their own shout in the aftermath.
Yeah, Dallas Fuel still have a good win rate on this map. They've only ever lost Coliseo to Gladiators. That's a tough team. So Fuel, will they be able to finish off the series, or are they boomed? Have Boston learned a thing or two? It'll be the battle for the statue control in the middle of the map. Sparkle's going through the top tunnel, maybe seeing if he can access someone like MCD or Faith at the back, even have some damage at an off angle to split the attention. Boston swinging away. Faith maybe even looking for a boob. He's going up against Chio. There's the speed call from Boston. And Dallas, I think, used their shout earlier, too, so they didn't have a good disengage tool. And Boston just run them over like a truck.
I think that was also a forced engagement as well from Boston Uprising, where they moved forward with a shout, and I don't know if Hanbin actually got all the members of Dallas Fuel with his own shout. There might have been some LOS issues, particularly for the backline, and so Dallas Fuel were easily overrun because their total health was so much lower than Boston Uprising's. And Boston Uprising making the first move is not entirely characteristic in this matchup. Dallas Fuel, like we've said before, this team loves to play fast. They are one of the fastest teams in the league, but Boston Uprising, they are matching step right now. And Valentine, halfway to the play, that's going to become a factor in the next fight.
Boston pushing the cart merrily, 27 meters. Not really worried. They don't want to make mistakes either. It's just Fuel that have to play from behind now, and they're the ones that have to act. But Boston kind of take this detour. They're trying to flank behind the Fuel, who just end up going forward. Now Valentine's behind the Fuel, and it's a little bit split up for Boston right now as Fuel just surge into the smaller group, and Valentine hasn't had an impact in the backline. So Boston got a little too creative on that rotation.
Yeah, MCD and Faith dying first is also somewhat indicative of poor comms and maybe poor pings as to where Dallas Fuel are, because they're getting caught up with by either the tank or DPS who can carve through that health bar very effectively. And Boston Uprising need to be careful to make sure there's a buffer between their backline and where Dallas Fuel's, where their sharpest swords are. Now drawing closer towards equal distance here, but Boston Uprising should be able to stop the bot in its tracks.
Still the lead for Boston. Getting close to an overclock, but it's Valentine that pulls out the blade first. Chio ready for the sound barrier, and Sparkle's blading at the same time, but you know who doesn't have barrier? Faith. He's down 7%. And look how much of a difference that 7% makes. That's a fuel fight win because of that.
We've pointed out before how some of our better teams like Dallas Fuel and San Francisco Shock, they're all about these tempo sound barriers, just using it to win the most important fights. And now Edison and Sparkle, these advanced positioning battles to try and force Boston Uprising to use resources to get them out of the way. This means that Boston Uprising are going to be less ideally suited to taking this last fight here.
56 meters for the Fuel. Shout first from Boston. Dallas Fuel with the second, but they add on the rally of Fielder. Faith pops the sound barrier now that the blade from Sparkle isn't a problem anymore, but isn't really helping Boston get ahead. The answer doesn't seem like yes, as Hanbin rampages through Mag and Victoria, forcing them back and forcing an MCD rally to try and save this fight. I think it's 4-on-2 in favor of the Boston Uprising, and Hanbin and whoever that was left were split up anyway, so Boston get the bot back.
I think that Hanbin's pathing on that rampage might have been a little wide, Lemon. Ended up not being able to be a huge part of that fight afterwards. Even though the anti was really good onto Mag, Mag had the commanding shout, which he used expertly when he was getting low to give himself a good buffer of health until the anti-heal wore off, and Boston Uprising could get him back up and fighting. Now it's Mag's turn to use for Rampage here, and of course Dallas Fuel, because they've been using their ultimates as and when they come up to take the fights in a much more fluid manner. In a pitched battle against a Rampage, they have far less chance of surviving.
Boston, last time we were at this point, kind of took that left staircase approach. Mag, Victoria, and MCD kind of posing themselves there. Valentine's trying to deny Dallas Fuel the access to the Mega Room. That's a good night pull, and Mag goes in for the Rampage after he pulls Hanbin in. Edison tries to fire back with an overclock, but really the damage is so massive. But Mag kind of traps himself in a small room, doesn't get any kills, and then the overclock was free from Edison and took down most of the Boston Uprising. We look back on the cart, and it's 2-on-2, now 2-on-1 for the Dallas Fuel.
Oh, that is a dirty comm right there. Mag somehow did not manage to tell Valentine, or Valentine did not listen, that he was not safe on that cart. And Valentine goes elsewhere looking to scout for more prey, and that means Mag can get overwhelmed in a quick 2v1 before Valentine can get back. Now the cart, or rather the bot, is going to be able to push the barricade towards that checkpoint, that important butt scratch moment, and it is going to be free. Now, for Dallas Fuel, they can back off. They've got themselves a little bit of grace to work with as Boston Uprising have to buy these positions, and Dallas Fuel can now play this a little bit more slowly. They can wait for Boston Uprising to have to use their own resources to start burrowing into the Fuel territory.
Valentine's blade could be big. There's no... I'm kidding. I was kidding. Did I say it was going to be big? It's quite micro. Valentine just gets absolutely destroyed. There was like a disruptor shot from Edison, and yeah, Fuel were kind of waiting for this to happen. Now Chio can pop sound barrier, and Dallas Fuel can have an insane engage. It's 70 meters now for the Dallas Fuel, and if this gets any bigger, Boston will be in trouble to keep alive in the series. Valentine is on the high ground. He's been whip shot. Dallas Fuel notice this. They use the sound barrier to re-engage. Victoria has to jump back, but still not enough space as Sparkle closes the gap with the Dragon Blade, killing 2, and Boston have to reset. There was some stalling, but Fuel should be getting up to 80 meters plus now.
The target focus and singular conviction of purpose in Dallas Fuel is unbelievable. The way they just run over Boston Uprising when Sparkle pulls out the blade as a complete unit, the hive mind, the Dallas Fuel Borg is what makes them so dangerous in this meta. Fielder, ready to pop the rally here, gives over some additional health to control the high ground.
Just Dallas Fuel, if they're going to be on this high ground, they got to drop all together. They've already used the shout and now the rally. They have a ton of overhealth. Boston are going to use their rally second. MCD's kind of frontlining right now, but everyone's right behind him. Sparkle is behind on the rotation or the escape, but it doesn't look like Boston have noticed or were able to punish. Victoria rejoins everyone, and he does not want to isolate himself because Sparkle at any moment can punish that.
Poorly considered rally from MCD, easily disengaged from the Rampage's boobs, but it has to be beaten anyway.
Yeah, Faith and Mag anti-heal, but the beat should save Boston. They take shelter in the Mega Pack room, and as Hanbin entered, he gets his ankles cut out from underneath him. Without the tank, it's just Fuel would have to out-poke this, but they're just gonna die on the bot now. They've already pushed 100 meters, so Fuel shouldn't be too worried.
Yeah, at this point, Dallas Fuel can do a little bit of bot trolling as well. Just try and move the objective away from like a pushing position to just a position that forces Boston Uprising to have to win 2 fights in a row in order to actually get any push. Hanbin's already on the corner. This is going to stop Boston Uprising from getting any material progress on the barricade until Hanbin feels he has to disengage, and he pops the shout to do so.
Some material girl push right there. Rampage, we are just farming coins off of these Dallas Fuel members. That's a great Rampage. And down the red carpet, Boston have a lot of fights to go though. They're only just getting to 50 meters now. It's 100 meters for Dallas Fuel, but at least the butt scratch will help Boston a little bit.
Yeah, they're going to get forward spawn here for anyone who dares fall in the forthcoming battles. And also, I'm not sure why Hanbin used his shout in the previous fight. That could have been very well used to try and sustain through the Rampage.
Well, you can't use Valentine's Blade now that he's dead, and Boston losing this momentum is just brutal. There's only 2 minutes left, and they got 40 meters to go, and MCD getting staggered here is awful. Why is he so far away from the rest of Boston? I think it's maybe them just taking the longer route around and MCD taking shortcuts, but either way, Boston are still getting pushed, and Sparkle's still getting kills.
Further staggers. Sparkle's vanilla Genji play with no blade required is still amazing. And against chunky targets like a Brigitte, it becomes all the more easy. Now Boston Uprising, they're going to be relying on their DPS duo, the Double Vs, Valentine and Victoria. Victoria, who's had a fantastic game thus far with the overclock, needs to turn this around here and now.
Oh, everyone from Fuel's just running away from the overclock of Victoria. They just can't seem to gap close, but as soon as Victoria approaches, Sparkle dashes in with the blade. He's got the Chio sound barrier and the leftover overhealth from the rally. Of course, Sparkle can do it all with the health that he has. Boston are going to try and fight back. Valentine against the world. He doesn't have the same support. He's got a late shout, though, at a perfect time. And now everyone from Boston is just body blocking for Valentine, who still manages to live with the 21 HP he ended up with. And Fuel are just out of sorts. They committed to too many different targets. Edison still got 2, and that should get Fuel a few more meters. It's 2 on 2 on the bot, but closer respawns for Boston means Fuel got a lead.
How did Edison manage this? Chio somehow lives as well while also trolling the bot a touch. Everyone can get out using the speed boost. This is going to be a reset for Dallas Fuel. They won't be able to take an actual fight without the amp it up, but Chio has just used to extricate Sparkle from the danger. But now with only 30 seconds remaining and a 40-meter advantage, almost 50, Dallas Fuel, they simply have to play the bot here. Distance is no longer an object to them. Boston Uprising need to win 2 or 3 fights in a row.
Boston have to go all the way, and Mag has already been forced to use the shout because he was half health, and maybe MCD didn't have enough packs. Boston have to play this slow, and they just can't afford to, but now both Sojourns have been removed. It's a 4-on-4. Rampage ready for Hanbin. Faith has to try and dodge it, or even go for a sound barrier before the follow-up comes up from Fuel. The Fuel are just letting them push this, waiting for them to get close. Mag rampages towards his own team, hits 4 of the Dallas Fuel, who just continue to back away, and Hanbin decides against counter-rampaging, as Fuel will just have to fold over this fight, and Boston will keep the game going.
You could definitely argue that like moving the theater of combat there for Dallas Fuel was a good idea to try and force fresh ultimates and investments out of Boston Uprising as they start to think of these as new fights, and that's why Mag uses the Rampage. Still, this has given Valentine some charge towards a blade. Dallas Fuel are coming up on 5 ultimates though. This is going to be a cataclysmic, apocalyptic fight for the Dallas Fuel.
Oh, Hanbin has the drop. He's in the middle of Boston, and he's getting all the help he needs. A rally and a Chio sound barrier to save Fielder before his death to keep the rally going. And Boston didn't have those same ults in time. Faith is dead. MCD too. Sparkle is shining for the Dallas Fuel when they needed him to the most. 109-0 as Dallas Fuel take the series 3-1.
15 final blows out of 25 elims for Sparkle. A huge performance from the premier Genji for the Dallas Fuel. And while there were some hiccups on Junkertown, Dallas Fuel's hive mind and singular glorious purpose that they unite behind remains a force to be reckoned with in this meta.
This is after Fuel only dropped 4 maps to this point, so Boston, even with the changes to their tank, were looking like they have a lot more potential than people thought. And I mean, to be fair, they got slapped by Shock, who are also undefeated right now. So Boston have been through the gauntlet of facing the top teams. But Boston we'll have to hope that they can win the next few matches they have remaining. I'm not sure what their schedule is, but you'll need... Oh, so they have Toronto and Vancouver, which I thought was winnable. You think it's not, but we'll have to see what Boston thinks.
I think it's going to be tough. Vancouver's definitely going to be a very tough one. Toronto, I think, is definitely going to be harder than Vancouver. Like, when it comes to these DPS matchups, right now, Hisu is incredibly impressive, and we're going to be able to see them later on today as well, going up against the LA Gladiators, so that'll give us a good litmus test of the power of Toronto Defiant.
Man, this is the Dallas Fuel meta. The Rush is all supreme. Back when the kickoff clash, they did amazing, and they're doing just that. Dallas Fuel will be locked in for the Summer Showdown, and there's one player that always helps them get ahead and is what keeps them relevant in these Genji metas. Your player of the match is Sparkle.
Oh yes, when we did begin our meta for Dallas Fuel without Sparkle, we wondered what everyone was up to. We had Doha in, but it seems like Rush has made the decision. I'm going to bring in the Sparkle Maestro to play the Genji that he's best known for. And it was a pretty good decision, IMO, for the Dallas Fuel to bring in their star player once more. And we did see some amazing continuums of play from Sparkle, where the dash resets were strung together beautifully. Admittedly, on Nepal, things started off a little bit wacky and wild for Sparkle, where he seemed to be playing Overwatch by himself rather than as a team. But when they reined him in on Midtown and made sure that he was obeying the commands and finding the finishing blows that the team was setting up, then Dallas Fuel started to look a lot more cohesive and effective.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's somewhere where Dallas Fuel can incorporate Doha in. If Doha is the better Mei, then maybe you bring him in for your Nepal or your Lijiang Tower maps and have Sparkle play the rest and use more of your bench lineup, where we've yet to see Seeker, but I'm excited for his debut because he rocked in Contenders, but Dallas Fuel are rocking in this meta, and we'll see what kind of a splash they'll make in the Summer Showdown. Up next, the Battle of the Reds, Atlanta Reign versus Paris Eternal, but we're going to throw, as usual, we throw it to a break. You'll hear from an interview, you'll hear from the watch point, and we'll see how their Preds held up. So we'll see you there.
루저 피해 겐지 걷자 겐지 겐지 봐. 와 씨발 살렸다. 와
나이스.
야 지렸다 인정?
지렸다. 나 뒤질 뻔했어 방금.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Upper Deck, the official trading card of the Overwatch League. And by TeamSpeak, the official voice supplier of the Overwatch League.
to Game Break, everybody. I'm here joined now by Fielder from Dallas Fuel. Fielder, congratulations on the win. 3-1 victory for the Dallas Fuels. How'd you guys get the win today against the Boston Uprising? 자, 오늘 승리 너무나도 축하드리면서 오늘 3대1로 좋은 성적을 내셨습니다. 오늘 보스턴 팀과의 경기 어떻게 해서 승리를 거두시게 되셨나요?
저희가 잘한 대로 그 템포 조절을 잘 쓰면서 공싸움으로 유도하니까 좀 쉽게 이긴 것 같아요.
죄송합니다. 끝에 한 번만 다시 좀 말해줄 수 있나요? 템포 조절이랑
공싸움, 저희가 잘하는 공싸움을 유도해서.
궁싸움?
네.
오케이, 알겠습니다. 감사합니다. So, how we got the win today against the Boston Uprising is mainly two things. I think we were really good at controlling the tempo of the fight. We were leading the tempo fights. That was pretty much very clutch. Sort of helped us get the win today, and also our ultimate usage and the ultimate battle between the two teams. I think we definitely had the upper hand today against the Boston Uprising. Now, I do agree that you guys looked really good, but as we're seeing right now, on Junkertown, I think was the only problem that you guys had. This was the only map you guys dropped against the Boston Uprising. So, what sort of problems were you guys having on Junkertown? 자, 방금 말씀하셨던 것처럼 이렇게 뭐 템포도 좋았고 이제 궁싸움에서도 이기셨는데 정커타운에서만 아쉽게 어떻게 보면 그 한 세트만 보스턴 쪽으로 넘겨주셨는데 정커타운에서는 좀 어떤 문제점들이 있었을까요?
정거타운은 이제 공격 때 제 실수가 좀 있어가지고 저 개인 실수 때문에 좀 힘들었던 것 같아요, 공격 때.
Okay. I think it's mainly because on Junkertown, I made a lot of mistakes, and I think it's my personal mistakes that sort of led to us losing on Junkertown against Boston Uprising. All right, Fielder, that is it for the interview. Thank you so much for your time, and again, big congratulations on the win. 자, 이걸로 인터뷰 마치도록 하겠습니다. 필더 선수, 감사합니다. Thank you.
감사합니다.
The Dallas Fuel improved to 4-0 in the Summer Showdown qualifiers. It feels routine at this point. The Dallas Fuel are back, just playing at the strength we expect them to. It's quite ridiculous.
You say that as if we didn't doubt them heading into this stage.
Yeah, but we were so wrong.
Yeah.
I'm personally responsible.
Formal apology, Dallas. You guys are doing great. Keep it up.
Yeah, I just can't interact with the social media though anymore. I can't take the Fuel fans just like, we told you. I know, I was wrong.
We told you.
God damn it, John.
You guys were right, I was wrong. I know, I'm sorry. But really, so many stand-up performances by Dallas Fuel today. Sparkle's Genji in particular was just like nasty.
Yeah.
Back.
Who knew? He was
back.
good at Genji.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
Exactly. It's Summer Showdown as well. You know, a bit of a Summer Showdown throwback. Obviously, I think the first stage we really got to know Sparkle in the Overwatch League anyway.
Oh yeah.
Was when he played Genji for the Paris Eternal in 2020, and now it's Summer Showdown. We're seeing lots of Genji again, and Sparkle just performed spectacularly across all maps.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, the Dallas Fuel, they're really just playing as a complete package. Everyone's doing their jobs. I think the only real time that we really saw them stumble was on that Junkertown, and, you know, we were looking at the stats towards the end of that. Fielder took personal accountability. Yes, there were mistakes across the board, but I think Edison really struggled in that map, and he has been probably one of the more inconsistent players for the Dallas Fuel. But, you know, it's a role that I don't think he's super comfortable on, but he's been doing a good job so far. So
Even though on the Junkertown, sorry, I just want to fill
No,
in,
you go.
they were a fight away from actually winning Junkertown.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't get that far on attack, but still one fight away. Edison popped off on the defense, etc. So the Dallas Fuel were still close to finishing that one off.
And the most important thing is, like, yes, I'm being critical, and, like, you're like, well, they're doing great. You know, why are you being so critical? It's these kind of things that they need to get out of their gameplay if they are going to be able to compete with, you know, the San Francisco Shock, the Los Angeles Gladiators. Well, I guess we don't even know if they're going to qualify. These top end teams.
0-3 Gladiators.
You